A lot of coverage over the last couple months and years, really, but certainly over the last few days about the topic of China, ZTE, trade. And I had a lot of questions about it, both in the hallways from the press, constituents back home, and even family and friends who've inquired what all the ruckus is about. And I thought it was a good opportunity to lay out for my constituents and broadly for the American people about what's at stake here. The first thing I would encourage everyone to do is to separate the two issues, the issue of trade with China and the issue of a specific company called ZTE, which is a phone company, telecommunications company in the cell industry, based in China. They're the fourth largest cell phone company in America up until very recently when they've struggled to stay in business. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's talk about those two things separately. They are not necessarily interrelated. On the broader topic of trade in China, the United States has an enormous imbalance in trade, as we do with other countries, but none like we do with China. A trade imbalance, by the way, in and of itself is not problematic. It really depends on what's caused it. But the trade imbalance with China is problematic because of how it's happened. China was basically a poor, underdeveloped communist dictatorship, and it decided it wanted to open up to the world and become more economically prosperous. This was many years ago. And so the deal the world made with China is, we're going to help you develop economically. You're going to open up, we're going to help you invest, we're going to help you create opportunity, we're going to let your companies invest in our economies. There are rules in the world for trade. There are things that are allowed and things that are not allowed. For example, you are not allowed to steal another company's secrets. So if another company has figured out how to make something, that's proprietary, they own it, they developed it, they spent money creating it, you are not allowed to go there and steal that from them and start making it yourself. There are rules about, you can't have rules that say your companies cannot sell in my country, but my companies from our country can do whatever we want in your country. There are rules. China has never played by those rules, and everybody knew it. Nobody disputed it. But administrations from both parties, the consensus politically in America was, go ahead, let's let China cheat. Let's let them keep stealing things. Because once China becomes richer and more prosperous, they'll stop doing that stuff. As soon as China's economy grows big enough, not only will they stop doing all that, but they'll become a democracy. Everyone who said that was wrong. That is not what's happened. They are less democratic, less open today than they used to be, and they are no longer just stealing little secrets to kind of even be in the same ballpark. They are stealing $600 billion a year of intellectual property. $600 billion a year is equivalent to what we spend on the U.S. military. They are stealing the equivalent of that every single year. How do they do it? Well, first of all, just straight out espionage. Time and again. I mean, they hack computers, they hack emails, they have spies embedded inside of companies. They straight out steal it through espionage. The second thing that they do to protect their industries and grow at our expense is they don't allow many of our companies to do business in China. Huge market. Their companies get to do business here, but they don't allow our companies to do business there. Some companies. They do allow other companies to do business in China, but here's the deal. If you do business in China, it has to be a joint venture with a Chinese company, 51% Chinese, 49% American company. And on top of that, there's another catch. If you want to do business in China with a Chinese company, you have to transfer your technology to them. So you want to build turbines? We'll let you build turbines in China, but you have to transfer to us the technology of how you do it. You know why they do that? Because once they figure out how to do it themselves, they don't need their American partner anymore. They kick you out, and now they're your competitor and may even put you out of business. That's happened a bunch of times. If they don't achieve it by forcing you to transfer, then they just straight out steal it from you. They also buy up small companies. You know, we have a law here that's called the CFIUS process, and basically when a foreign company, especially from a country like China, is buying in a key industry, it undergoes this review to make sure that it's not a bad deal, that they could be taking secrets that are tied to national security. So they figured it out. They're just buying small American companies, a bunch of them in many cases, that are under the level that we look at, these subcontractors, and finding their way in that way. Suffice it to say that we have a very serious imbalance with China, but the imbalance is not the dollars. The imbalance is in the structure of trade between China and the United States. And that's why we don't need a short-term trade deal. This is not about saying, all right, go ahead and buy more of our agriculture. Go ahead, you guys go buy more of the stuff that you were going to buy more of anyways, because you need to. And in exchange, you get to keep doing what you're doing now, and there won't be any tariffs. That's a short-term deal. And it might be a good headline. You can claim that you won. But in the end, it doesn't do anything to change this. In fact, it leaves us worse off. It leaves us, you might as well not have even gotten into this in the first place. You have actually strengthened them even more. And how they win this fight, by the way, let me tell you how they win. They go to all those American multinational corporations, many of whom are just interested in how their stock is performing from quarter to quarter, and they go to them and say, lobby your congressman, lobby your senator, lobby the White House, and convince them to drop all this. And they do it. Because these companies, what they want to do is they want access to the 1.3 billion people. A lot of them, they don't care if they're only 49% of the company in China. They don't care if they're stealing their intellectual property. By the time that matters, the CEO and the people making that decision will be long ago retired with a huge golden parachute bonus because they delivered a bunch of quarters of earnings. That's so short-sighted. They may not care about it, but those of us who work here have to. Because we do not want to live in a world where China dominates industry, not because they out-innovated us or worked harder, that's because they stole it from us. And by the way, the Chinese have figured all of this out. They have figured out exactly how to get things done in American politics. They don't lobby the government, they lobby the business sector. And then all these large corporations go marching into Capitol Hill and into the White House and scream and plead to drop all this. Of course they do. Because they're going to make a lot of money in China over the next 5 or 6 years. But a lot of these companies are one day going to be out of business. Short-term thinking. Their obligations are to their shareholders. Their shareholders are not all Americans. Our obligations are to the American people and America's future. And this is disastrous. We need a structural rebalance, not just a dollar rebalance. China is not a developing country. It is the second largest economy in the world. It will soon be the largest economy in the world. And yet we continue to let them cheat and steal. That's the trade issue. ZTE is something completely different, related, but completely different. Let me tell you about ZTE. ZTE broke the law. Okay? ZTE sold goods and services to Iran, to North Korea. They violated sanctions, and they tried to cover it up. And they got caught. And when they got caught, they got hit with a fine, and they were told, you need to fire the people who tried to cover it up and the people who did this. They paid the fine, but they did not fire the people who did this. You know what they did instead? They gave them bonuses, and they tried to cover that up. And so the Commerce Department said, fine, we caught you, we made a deal with you, you broke that deal, so now the penalty is you cannot buy American semiconductors. That was the penalty. We're not going to sell you any more semiconductors for 7 years, and ZTE says it's going to put us out of business because they do depend on us for semiconductors. Now we're reading that there's a new deal in place, potentially. And the new deal is not official, but I read it and it's been reported. The new deal is this. All right, we're going to let you stay in business. Pay a fine, $1 billion or $1.3 billion, I heard this morning. $1.3 billion is nothing for a company backed by the government of China. The Chinese government will pay it for them. Are you kidding me? $1.3 billion to be able to continue to stay in business and one day replace America in telecommunications? That's nothing. And the other sanction, guess what it is? We're going to force you to buy more things from America. Well, that's not a punishment. That's a reward. That's exactly what they want. That was the sanction. The sanction was they couldn't buy more from us because they can't stay in business unless they buy from us. The punishment is going to be, instead of punishing you by denying you semiconductors, we're going to really punish you by forcing you to buy more semiconductors from America. They were going to do that anyway. That's actually a reward, not a punishment. So that's a terrible deal. And some people will say, well, that is a deal that's tied into the broader trade deal, another terrible deal. If I were China, I would give us anything we want on ZTE in exchange with being able to continue to undermine the American economy. But it goes deeper than that. See, here's the other problem with ZTE. If it's not just one company, that's one thing. China intends to dominate the world in the key technologies of the 21st century: aerospace, biotech, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, 5G and telecommunication. They're going to dominate the world. You know why I know that? It isn't because I read some fancy article. It isn't because I'm on the Intel committee. It isn't because of a hearing. It isn't because of a meeting. You know how I know that? Because China says it. They have a plan called China 2025, Made in China 2025, and here's what the plan basically means. By the year 2025, China will be the dominant country in the world in these 10 to 12 industries, which happen to be the 10 or 12 industries that are going to determine the fate of the 21st century. Biotech, that basically means genetic medicine, the ability to cure diseases like Alzheimer's disease and others that are going to be a plague on the world in the years to come. Aerospace means technology for space. It also means aircraft and the like. They don't intend to be competitive in those fields. They intend to dominate those fields. Now, you may say, well, what's wrong with that? Countries can want to dominate fields. Well, that's fine. If you are going to become the dominant power in the world in these key technologies, you have every right to do so, but not by breaking the rules. And that's how they're doing it. How does China intend, what are they doing in order to dominate the world in 2025? To their credit, they invest a lot of money in research and in development. They also invest a lot of money in stealing whatever we've already done. So think about it. America invests taxpayer money, we innovate something, we innovate it, and after we spend all of your money innovating these things, they take it from us and steal it. It costs them nothing to start out exactly where we are after years and years of work. So think about that for a moment. That is an enormous competitive advantage. They have free research funded by the American taxpayer. They steal it. What else do? They do other things. How do they steal it, you may ask? One of the ways they steal it is through telecommunications. They are trying to embed themselves in our telecommunications system. And here's how. They know, for example, that the US government or a defense contractor are not going to buy a ZTE phone, but they have a solution for that. And the solution is they sell the ZTE phone, the exact same phone with the exact same components inside of it, the things they can turn on and off to listen to us or take emails or documents or whatever they need. They sell the exact same phone to an American telecommunications provider. The American telecommunications provider puts their sticker on it, so you think you're buying not a ZTE phone, but a phone that belongs to an American company, and they sell it. It's called white labeling. You sell the same, or a router. Huawei has a router. The Department of Defense or the government, we're not going to put a Huawei router in a sensitive place. That's fine. They'll just sell it to an American company. That company will take off Huawei and put on their sticker, and you've got a router controlled by a Chinese company who is beholden to Chinese intelligence. Even if they wanted to not cooperate, they don't have a choice. And when they tell them, we want you to go into that router and we want you to get the secrets of this company or the secrets of the US government, not only do they have to do it, they will do it, especially if it's in telecommunication. That's happening right now. They embed themselves in our telecommunications system that way through white labeling. The other thing they do is they use their American subcontracting unit. So again, they know that no one's going to hire them to build a military base and put the wire in it. You hire an American company. That's the prime contractor. They come in as a subcontractor to the prime contractor, and they're the ones doing the work. We think we hired an American company, but the work's being done by a subcontractor controlled by ZTE or Huawei or any of these other companies. That's another way that they do it. And I'm telling you guys, we are going to wake up one day and realize that in our own country, embedded in our telecommunications systems, in our cable, in our routers, in our internet, are a bunch of component pieces that not only leave vulnerable our Department of Defense, but our business community to what? To stealing corporate secrets and commercial secrets that allow them to take the research America has done and use it as their starting point free of cost. This is not fantastic. This is why people here are so fired up about ZTE. This is not a game. Somebody just sent me an article a few minutes ago, I don't know which one of these publications it was, talking about me and taking on the president on ZT. This is not a political game. Nothing to do with that. This is not about politics. Do we not understand where we are headed? You have a country that is actively saying, we are going to displace you. We are going to be the most powerful country in the world, and we are going to do that at your expense. And we're out here talking about all kinds of other crazy stuff, or political reporters cover this through the political lens. This is not a game. You know why China wins these negotiations? Because they don't play these games. They know what this is about. They have a 10-year plan, 20-year plan, 50-year plan. We can't even think 48 hours ahead. And everything here is about a political thing. This is not a game, guys. Whether you want to believe it or not, every single one of us was elected. We've participated in politics. But I think most of us, if not all of us here, do not want to live in a world in 10, 15, 20 years on our watch where some other country now dominates the world at our expense. We now work for them. We now are beholden to them for everything from medicines to technologies. And we were here when it happened. And we didn't do anything about it because we were loyal to our party or because we were too busy, focused on, well, you guys, just turn on the news when we have this massive threat before us. This is the stuff historians write about, by the way. 100 years from now, if this happens, we'll all look like fools. Because if you're just watching this on an hour-by-hour basis, it's not a big story. But 100 years from now, when someone writes the history of the 21st century, and we let this happen, they're going to write about us. And they're going to say that we were fiddling while Rome was burning, that we were allowing the Chinese to take over the world at our expense and displace us because we were too busy doing all kinds of other things. This also, by the way, is not just about business. You turn on some of the networks that cover the stock market, and they cover this like a casino. Oh, the trade thing is doing better today, so the stocks are up, or the stocks are down. This is not just, forget about that for a moment. You can make all the profits you want over the next 3 to 6 months. I promise you, and then if this continues, in 10 or 15 years, you won't be watching the U.S. stock market, you'll be watching the Chinese markets. And they will be determining whether our companies survive. It'll be us. It'll be us on the outside looking in. And then Americans are going to wonder, why do we no longer invent great things? Why do we now have to do whatever China wants in the world in order to get the medicines we need to cure my mom or my dad's Alzheimer's? And the answer will be because when they were displacing us, your policymakers were too busy arguing with each other and playing dumb, ridiculous games on a regular basis. Meanwhile, China was focused like a laser with a plan, and they executed on it. This is not a game. I can think of no more significant issue from the perspective of history than what is happening now. And do not misunderstand me. I do not come here to say that I want to be unnecessarily aggressive with China or that I want there to be a confrontation. China is going to be a rich and a powerful country. And we have no problem with that. We can't have any problem with that. But there has to be a balance. It cannot be a China that is rich and powerful and an America that is weak and not prosperous. Because those imbalances are what create wars. Those imbalances are what create misery. Those imbalances are what destabilize the planet. That can't be. We need to recalibrate this relationship. It needs to be rebalanced on the trade side. It needs to be protective on our national security side. It needs to be equalized. And if it is, China can still be very successful. They're going to invent things. They're going to create jobs. They're going to become more prosperous, and that is fine. We've been doing that for 100 years. Every person in this gallery, sitting in the gallery, every person here in the well of the Senate on the floor, everyone you know has products on them, a phone, a belt, made in another country. The issue is not that other countries make things and we don't. It's not about us dominating everything. It's about balance. And this is not balanced. This is headed to a dramatic imbalance, and the imbalance used to be they made cheap things and sent it back to us so we had lower prices. That's what's happened for the last 30 years. They made cheaper T-shirts, they assembled the phones cheaper, and they shipped it back to the United States, leading to lower prices. That's not the imbalance I'm talking about. The imbalance we're headed to is they control state-of-the-art artificial intelligence. They control the state-of-the-art quantum computing, which means that nothing can be encrypted anymore, which means there are no such things as secure cars left. The President of the United States one day will not be able to talk to his national security officials anywhere in the world without the Chinese hearing it, because no matter what encryption you put in, they'll break it with a quantum computer. That's the imbalance I'm talking about. The imbalance I'm talking about is one day we'll have a dispute with China on something on national security somewhere in the world, and they will threaten to cut off our supply of biomedicines. In essence, threaten the lives of Americans not getting medicine unless we cave to their desires. That's the imbalance I'm talking about. The imbalance I'm talking about is one where they dominate aerospace, where they are the nation that controls satellites and satellite communication. They are the nation that controls 5G. We're headed towards autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles will depend on 5G technology. And China will dominate the world in 5G, and we will depend on it. So we're going to build a fleet of autonomous trucks and autonomous cars, and none of them will work if the Chinese decide to shut it down because they dominate that field. That's the imbalance I'm talking about. And if this all sounds fantastic, apocalyptic, look it up. Research it. And I promise you, you will not find a single person versed on this topic that would disagree with what I'm saying. This is the threat that we face, and we are not facing it squarely. So I would advise those who cover this issue to stop covering it as a political issue. There are some things so important to this country that I don't care what the politics of it are, and most of my colleagues don't either, because these are definitional things that will define the 21st century. I would advise us not to cover this as a purely economic issue, because there is a way to grow the trade gap in the short term. We can sell them a lot more of the things China is willing to buy anyway. They don't intend to lead the world in those things, in exchange for them dominating us in the long run. Get rid of the short-term thinking and start thinking our competitor has a 50, 100, 20, and 5-year plans. And we don't even know what we're going to be talking about next week. It is time to wake up to this threat, because we have two ways forward. There can be a balanced relationship between two great powers, leading to a world that is stable and secure and prosperity, or we can have an imbalanced world in which a rising power in China does so at the direct expense of a falling status quo power in the United States, and that instability will lead to conflict and a way of life for Americans that we will find unacceptable. And then it will be too late. And then we will have to explain, maybe to our children, and most certainly to our grandchildren, why the America we grew up in led the world in all the great innovations and all the great ideas and provided prosperity to millions of people here and around the world, and the America they get to grow up in is a second-tier power, while China dominates everything that matters. And if you think that that's just the way, that's not a big deal, one of the reasons why democracy has spread across the planet is because the world's most powerful country was a democracy. If the world's most powerful country is a dictatorship, a country that has no respect for privacy, a country that has no respect for free speech, a country that has no respect for religious liberty of its own people, a country that has no regard for human rights anywhere in the world, if that's the most dominant nation on earth, what do you think the world's going to look like in 20 or 30 years? It's not going to be a better place. Democracy is morally superior to autocratic regimes. We should not be afraid to say that. And if for no other reason, if you want to put aside economics for a moment and confront it from that angle, we cannot allow an autocratic dictatorship to dominate the global economy and global technology by stealing from us at the expense of the democratic order in the world. Democracies are morally superior to dictatorships. And if we allow China to cheat and steal their way into dominance, there will be more dictatorships and less democracies on this planet. And we will all pay a price for that. So I urge everyone to take this issue seriously. And I urge the president to listen carefully to those in his own administration who understand this threat holistically for what it is. And I urge them to move in a direction that recalibrates the structure of our relationship with China economically, and that does not allow not just ZTE, but numerous other telecom companies from continuing to grow and spy at our expense. That is what I encourage them to do. That is the right thing to do for the future of this country, not some short-term deal that makes us feel good and potentially gets you a positive headline in the short term, but which historians will condemn as the beginning of the end of America's place in the world as its most influential nation.